Welcome to an introduction to accounting brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. For further information about Parkbench Tutors, please visit parkbenchtutors.com. In this podcast we are going to look briefly at how a number of simple transactions affect the accounting equation. So, what is the accounting equation? The accounting equation is about assets, which must be equal to liabilities plus equity. So, assets equal liabilities plus equity. This is our basic accounting equation, which is used throughout accounting. Here is our first transaction. The owners of a business deposit £50,000 with a bank. How is the accounting equation affected? What has happened to assets? Assets have increased by £50,000. Fine, but what about liabilities and equity? There has been no effect on liabilities, but equity has increased by £50,000. Which accounts are affected by these entries? The accounts affected are the bank account and capital. To summarise what has happened, the owners deposited £50,000 in the bank, assets increased by £50,000 and equity increased by £50,000. The equation is balanced. Here is our second transaction. The owners purchase equipment at £4,000 with the aid of a bank loan. How will the accounting equation be affected? Assets have increased by £4,000. The bank is owed £4,000, so liabilities have increased by £4,000. There is no effect on equity. Which accounts have been affected by the transaction? An account for equipment, which will be an asset account, and an account for a bank loan, which will be a liability account. To summarise, a piece of equipment was bought for £4,000 with a bank loan, the asset of equipment increased by £4,000 and liability increased by £4,000. The accounting equation was balanced. The owners now purchase 600 units of inventories at £10 per unit, a total outlay of 600 times 10, £6,000. Assets will increase by £6,000. The inventory has been purchased on credit, so we have a liability of £6,000. Which accounts are affected? An asset account for inventories and a liability account for trade payables are affected. To summarise, when £6,000 of inventories were purchased on credit, assets increased by £6,000 and liabilities increased by £6,000. The accounting equation is balanced. The next transaction is a little more complicated. A total of 400 units are sold on credit at £15 per unit. Consider first what has happened to inventory. Inventory has been reduced by 400 units that were purchased at £10 each. So inventory has been reduced by 400 times 10, a total of £4,000. The minus sign here indicates that assets were reduced. Equity has also been reduced by the same amount, £4,000. The accounts affected are the asset account of inventories and the equity of cost of sales. What about the receipts from the sale? A total of 400 times 15, which is £6,000, has increased assets. Equity has increased by the same amount, the sum of £6,000. Which accounts are affected? The two accounts that have been affected are the asset account of trade receivables and the equity of sales. The accounting equation remained balanced. The effect on inventory was to reduce this account by £4,000 and equity was reduced by the same amount. The receipt from the sale increased assets by £6,000 and also increased equity by £6,000. The last transaction we shall consider is payment of rent. A sum of £500 is paid by cheque. The payment will reduce assets by the sum of £500. Will also reduce equity by the same amount of £500. Which accounts are affected by the transaction? The two accounts affected are the asset account of bank and the equity account for rent expense. To summarise this transaction, when rent of £500 is paid, the assets are reduced by £500 and equity is reduced by £500. The accounting equation remains balanced. We have shown how the accounting equation is affected by 5 simple transactions. The accounting equation remains balanced at the end of each transaction. This ends our podcast on the accounting equation. Thank you for watching and for listening. For further information on Park Bench Tutors, please visit parkbenchtutors.com.